Hey guys, Raf here from the Endgame Investor. I got Phil Lowe on the line. We are going to discuss the benefits of anarchy.
Mr. President, the Blemflark's value just dropped to nothing.
Deploy the Galactic Militia and declare martial law.
Yes, sir. What should I pay them with?
Their payment is the honor they'll feel to serve their... Wait, who's paying me to yell at this guy?
I can answer that. For money.
How it could work, and really what to do in the initial stages of the endgame, meaning right after the monetary nuke hits, the dollar is dead. What are you supposed to do? A big question, or a repeating question that I get is, okay, well, let's say the dollar doesn't work, then what am I supposed to do? Just go to my grocery store and give coins to the guy and he's gonna give me food? Like, how's he gonna do that? So I have a two-pronged answer to that question. So the first is from a logical point that, barring nuclear war, barring mass destruction of physical property, assuming that the day before the end game and the day after the end game, or let's say the week before or the week after, or whatever the time chunk is going to be, we're going to have basically the same amount of stuff that we did before as we do after. The total cumulative purchasing power of mankind is not going to diminish from pre-endgame to post-endgame, because all the physical stuff that we had is going to exist, or most of it. Let's say 90, there's going to be some destruction. Fine, let's just give that. So let's say like 98% of the stuff, 97, whatever, high 90% of stuff is going to survive the monetary fiscal crisis. So then what you have is purchasing power does not disappear cumulatively. It shifts from one thing to another. So it shifts from the dollar, right? Everyone had a whole bunch of dollars or dollar derivatives, and they thought in their minds that they had the purchasing power to acquire XYZ stuff. And then suddenly the next day they figure out that I can't buy anything with these things. So who can? I mean, the purchasing power went somewhere. The answer is it went into real assets. It went into all real assets, because you can trade anything for any other thing, but it is most highly concentrated in the monetary assets because those are the most liquid. So purchasing power went from dollars to gold and silver, and therefore all the purchasing power will be with the gold and silver, and then it's the gold and silver stackers that will have to buy stuff. The question is, how do you do that? Well, how do you convince people to accept your coins in the immediate aftermath? And I have two answers to that. And the first is, and Phil, you can chime in on this too, when I'm done with my little spiel here. So I remember, sometimes on Twitter, there's these like inspirational videos of animals. And I remember one of them being, that was like on my feed maybe a few months ago, ducks who had never been in a pond, never seen water before, or never seen a body of water they could swim in. And they're aquatic animals, right? They've been in a cage their whole life. And then all of a sudden they're set free and they see this like pond in front of them. Like, what are they supposed to do? And then like they're hesitant at first. They don't know if they can swim. They don't know what it is. And then one of them just like flies in, and then the rest of them are like, oh, and then they all go and they like have a great time in the pond. They just love it, and they're swimming naturally and everything's great. How do they know how to do that? Well, they have an instinct. They're aquatic animals, right? So it's all, you can say the same thing about how do human beings, how do we figure out how to do sex? I mean, it's just, we figured it out, right? We have an instinct to do, it's like, if you're a male, you have an instinct to do that. If you're a female, you have an instinct to do that. Nobody taught you, like the first generations of humans didn't have a sex ed class. Nobody taught them what to do. They just did it, right? That's how we evolved. So we have a natural instinct, but we're also trade beings. We're economic beings. We trade with each other. And Phil and I were having a conversation before we started recording. Are there any other animals or any other creatures on the planet who trade? And maybe you said might be crows, or because sometimes they leave a bottle cap if you leave them food, but it might be not trade. It might be they thinking some kind of magic. Maybe if they put this bottle cap there, they'll get food. They don't really know what they're doing. But while there are many species of apes that use tools, it's unclear if there are any other animals that trade. But trade is definitely a natural instinct. So in the end game, we can either kill each other or we can trade, and we're going to have a natural instinct to trade because we don't want to kill each other. And everyone's going to realize that gold and silver, because they'll be going up and up and up in the weeks and months before the end game. People will understand that the purchasing power is there. So yeah, I think you can go to your grocery store, maybe not your grocery store, but to the guy who has a lot of food, because the grocery store might be robbed by a mob or something. but maybe not. I mean, you will be able to take your coins and buy stuff because that is the human instinct. And it's like the ducks going to the pond or somebody figuring out how to have sex for the first time will figure out how to trade with coins because that's what we always did.
Yeah, it might be a little awkward at first, but you'll get the hang of it.
Yeah.
Just like your first time.
But I thought you wanted to make love.
Is that what you call this?
Yep.
Hi, Rafi.
Hi.
So the inspiration actually came from the inspiration for this question came from a viewer, but it actually brought me back. One of the reasons that I immediately gravitated towards your show was my when I went to college. I got a degree from George Mason in Austrian economics, and there were other students in that class, and they stood, after, these are 3-hour lectures, right? So they take a break, hour every hour and a half. So we'd go out, and these guys were like, they were very well dressed. They had shirt, tie, and this is at a university, right? So they look like the young Republicans, but you talk to them and they're like, no, we're anarchists, and because when you think of like a college anarchist, you think like didn't bathe in a while, like A on the shirt, ready to blow the student hall down with a Molotov, and just a spoiled rich kid too, also, right? But no, they're and they were anarcho-capital. I mean, they were Rothbardian anarchists basically. And I just remember having like, at the time, I would describe myself as a '90s liberal at the time. I mean, I hated the war. This is like 2004. I hated the Bush wars. I hated the Patriot Act. I had a lot of like libertarian tendencies already, but I was like voting Democrat all the time. When you're young, you don't flesh all this stuff out until you get older and start figuring out, oh, it's all a big scam. But anyway, so I was talking to these guys, and I just remember like having these wild conversations with them, and they would defend their positions very, very well. I didn't necessarily agree with them, but at the time, I think I agree with them a lot more now. But I just remember they defend the position excellently. And they're talking to them, I think, is what helped me gravitate to you, because I said, when I got my degree, when I finished my education, I kind of just took everything and just put it in my pocket and went and got a job as a computer programmer, right? Because there's not a lot. I said this before on my channel, Austrian economists are not hireable because the only thing we want to do is shut all the regulatory agencies down. So you can't go to Freddie May and say, yeah, I'd like a job here. Well, what do you do? Well, I want to close this place.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, no one will ever hire you. So when I got my degree, I said, okay, well, this is all nice. This is very nice. I learned a lot and I feel like I'm smarter for it, but this is not applicable. This is not the world I live in. And when I saw your show, I said, oh, this is about to be the world I live in. So I said, let's bring, let me dredge out these old conversations I had. Let me, bring it all back, and maybe we can put it together, and maybe we can actually apply all this stuff to the real world. Now, I will say my economics education helps me every single day. I do think it made me a much smarter person, and I understand like how markets work and things like that. But like I said, there wasn't a lot of direct application until your show came along.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah. Well, that's why I started my channel. I said I have people, because there's so many people online, and I think you're heading in the closest to the right direction that anyone can. So
I'm looking at your talking points here about anarchy.
yes.
The first thing you write is we would discuss good anarchy, minimal government, communities working together in voluntary exchange, sad money, etc., versus bad anarchy, Somalia-like warlordism, cheap value of human life, chaos, etc., and why one or the other occurs, and how we can push for the good kind of anarchy. And I think it's unfortunate that these two things, an anarchic spontaneous order, it happens to be the same word as anarchy, where everyone's killing each other. I think that's just a bad coincidence, or it's they really should have different words, but we just don't have them.
Spontaneous order, I guess. Like, so when the dollar dies, why would we balance in a spontaneous order instead of anarchy? Like, why would we go into the anarchy of the buttoned up young Republican guys instead of the t-shirt wearing Molotov cocktail throwing guy.
I want to mention that that there is the period of anarchy, in terms of anarchy meaning there is no central authority and people just organize on community levels and there's
Right.
government really. That existed in the Bible between Joshua's time, who was the government, after his death, until King Saul. Right. So in between that time, I think it was like 300, 400 years or something like that, maybe a little less. The book of Judges, it feels like an era where there's just constant war. But in between each story of war, there's a verse when one story ends, like Vayishkot haaretz 40 shana, Vayishkot haaretz 40 shana, or the land was quiet for 40 years, the land was quiet for 80 years. Like that's the longest period of peace ever. Right? 80 years ago was 1944. Right? Like a lot has happened since then. If you can have even 40 years of peace of nothing happening, nothing to write, nothing
Yeah.
like that would be
That's a
amazing.
good day.
Right? And then once government started, once King Saul became king, and you had the Davidic line, and then everything after that was just war, never stopped, even for a year.
Yeah.
So anarchy is very peaceful, at least in the Bible it is. And yes, there are problems in between. It's not a perfect system. But what I would say is that in the initial end game blast, there's going to be bursts of bad types of anarchy, but people don't want that. They want to trade, so they will find people to trade with, and they'll try not to kill people. We're tilted in the wrong direction. Because we see news about the World Economic Forum, we went through COVID, we see all these bad people controlling everything. We think they're all powerful, so we have this incorrect idea in our heads that everyone is evil, or everyone's crazy, or everyone's like chopping off their children's genitals and transitioning them, because we hear it but it's not that way. Like there's still mostly good people in the world, and they don't want to kill you.
Yeah.
So
and they don't want to be killed either.
They don't want to be killed either. They don't
Yeah.
want to be killed either. They want to find someone who has a lot of money, who can pay a lot of people and get a fiefdom, and they want to work for you. That's what they want to do. So you gotta find that. So what do you say?
So I would draw everyone's attention to a movie. Actually, it's Rob Roy. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
I've heard of it.
It's the best movie on 18th century Scottish banking you'll ever see. But
I've seen a lot of them. Yeah.
So the way I think of it is like, it takes place, like I said, in the 18th century, and it's a quasi state of anarchy in Scotland at that time. So they're lords and they rule, and then there's peasants and they farm, but the peasants don't really there's no like policeman to come to, right? If there's a big property dispute, maybe you can get the lord's attention to settle this kind of stuff, but most people just settle in either themselves or in the community, right? Mm-hmm. And the way they settled it is one of the important mechanisms for trade and credit is your honor. But my point is the whole movie was about his sense of honor, and it was because that was the most important thing to him in the state of, rough anarchy that they were in. Because if word gets out that he is a liar, a cheat, doesn't pay his debts, lets his cows get stolen, right? If any of that gets out, he's like, I might as well just jump into the ocean, right? It is worth more than my life to preserve this sense of honor.
Honor is what no man can give you, and none can take away.
You could think of it as his credit score, right? He's like, I got a credit score of 800. Like, I am not going to do anything to have this credit score go down, right?
Right.
So that's the way.
It's a social credit score in a good sense.
Yeah, social credit score. You get known for your credit in a state of anarchy. You get known locally for your ability to get things done and your ability to be trusted with other people's money. If they give you money to start a business, can you turn that business into something profitable, right? So, and it just gets very local. Instead of go writing Experian to find your credit score, you just you ask your neighbors, hey, am I a trustworthy guy?
Right.
And it's going to be more like that, I would imagine. Maybe credit scores will get back up somehow. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. So
But I
how-
mean, especially in the immediate aftermath, it's going to be much more localized and much more informal. And that's the other thing, the credit system is informal. Like it's not, are you just get known as a man of your word, or you get known as somebody who can't get the job done.
Yeah. Unfortunately, what I see happening is, at least in the very, very big cities, like the metropolises, like Cairo or Chicago, New York City, LA, the really, really big cities, especially in the third world, they will, a lot of them are going to kill each other. Unfortunately, I think, I don't see any other way out of that.
Yeah.
But people in the suburbs will be less affected, and people in the country will be even less affected than that. And I do think there's going to be like this spasm of panic and anarchy in the bad sense, but it's not going to last that long. I don't think.
We have anarchy. Like, I mean, people are like, oh, I can't stand it. I'm so scared of anarchy. Like, go to New York right now. Like, the shops are being pilfered. Cops are being beaten in the streets. If you try and stop your shop from being shoplifting, you get arrested, right? By the police. I mean, it's I mean, at least in anarchy, in a true state of anarchy, if somebody's robbing you and you kill them, I mean, people are, let me put it this way. People are worried like, oh, if in anarchy, if I call the cops and no one picks up the phone, what can I do? In the state of anarchy, if somebody's robbing or attacking you and you shoot them, there's nobody to call to get you in trouble either.
Right.
So you get with your neighbors and you say, look, I'll protect we'll all agree, we'll all protect each other's houses and shops or whatever this neighborhood is. We'll protect this neighborhood. And if anything happens, we all rush out with our guns and deal with it.
Right. Well, that is anarchy because you're agreeing to it. Right?
Yeah. We're all going to protect this area together. Now, I mean, the downside is, it's hard to leave your neighborhood, during that time, because you build this reputation. You have this whole network of people you're living with. Everyone knows you. Then you go, 10, 20 miles down the way, and now you're a total stranger. Now, it's like the stranger in a Western rode into town.
Right.
Everyone's sizing you up. Nobody knows which way you're going to blow,
Okay, so there's a few questions you pose here. We want to go over them. So you say, a good anarchy would look like in the monorail. What do private roads look like? What do private police and courts look like? How do property rights work in an anarchy? First, I want to say that Murray Rothbard tries to deal with some of these questions in For a New Liberty. I read it a long time ago. I don't remember exactly how he deals with every issue, but these are issues that have been dealt with by libertarians. I know Walter Block specializes in how private roads would work. And Murray Rothbard writes about how theoretically an anarchist society could pan out. And I don't think it can work without a good cultural base. If you don't have a good culture or basic morality, then anarchy could be bad. But I still think that America has a good cultural base. And, one of the reasons a lot of people tell me, especially with the situation heating up in Israel now, they say, why don't you go back to Canada or go back to America, and I'll give you a nice place in Texas or Ontario or whatever, and you can wait it out. And, it's too dangerous in Israel. But, we're all going to have to fall back on the culture that made us a great people. America is going to have to fall back on its own culture. And the reason I'm in Israel is because I know what culture we're going to fall back on. We have a very, very old one that is still active, and we're going to fall back on that one. We're going to fall back on our Jewish culture, and that automatically makes us act like a family. You should have seen what this country was like a day after, 2 days after the war broke out. It was like I just wanted to cry and hug everyone and forgive them all for all the evil they did to me during COVID. And I'm still seeing that ice being broken. So you need a good culture, but how would it work? Let's say the dollar's dead, gold and silver are money again. Then what happens to all the infrastructure? Private roads? How does all this work? Who's the police, and what incentivizes them, and courts?
Well, I'll say so. I went to Mongolia once, and they solved the problem. They have a problem with the road. Once you get outside their main city, there's not much in the way of roads, and they solved the problem by just having giant solid rubber tires. So there's nothing like your tire can't pop. They drive these big old Soviet machines that they have modern cars too, but the one I rode in was a Soviet one. They're all kind of mixed together. So I was in a Soviet van with these giant rubber tires that just off-road as much as you want. So I mean that is one solution, is just to have the vehicle that is capable of going over roads that are not maintained ever. The other one would be obviously, I guess, communal toll roads of some kind, so my neighborhood, maybe like the Romans, they would build the road and then say, okay, you local village, you maintain this area. So maybe that's the way that would go. And then we have to keep it, relatively flat, and maybe we get to toll for it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the responsibility for maintaining roads would break up into communities that would be responsible for keeping their roads working, or else people wouldn't be able to travel.
But how would an interstate highway work? I mean, that interstate highway would pretty much collapse then.
That might be true. I remember Ron Paul speaking not so fondly of the Interstate Highway project. I think that was started by Eisenhower. And this is one of those projects that would only be possible with humongous amounts of credit. I don't know if it would be possible in a gold standard society. It would once you reach a certain level of wealth, but there'd be probably a lot fewer highways and a lot more decentralized communities, and you wouldn't need humongous highways across countries, or at least so many of them in a more decentralized world. They just wouldn't be necessary. And you'd have slower growth and less roads and more wilderness. Exactly how the world would look, I don't know, but we're going to find out soon, because a lot of the population isn't going to make it, and we're going to be a lot smaller.
Do you think we're going to depopulate?
We're already depopulating. The West is.
Yeah. I think the rest will start repopulating. Actually, I mean, I think the people will start having more kids again.
If they can be supported, maybe after the first few years, yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be like the first few. I don't know how long it's going to take. Maybe a few months, maybe a few years for the initial shock to wear off, and then things to be reorganized. But all the leaders are going to be gone, and regions are going to break up into maybe cities, maybe municipalities. I don't know. It's not going to be the United States. It's going to be the territory of the United States, but different authorities. How would you buy a house in gold and silver? You can't just hand over a bunch of metal and then he gives you the house. And then what about the legal ramifications? Who owns the property? People ask me questions about taxes. I say taxes are not going to be relevant because
taxes are not an issue. Yeah, don't worry about taxes.
Taxes are not an issue, but titles to
property rights, yeah,
will be relevant. How are those going to be transferred when the dollar is worthless? Everyone's going to be in the same predicament here. But how would it work?
The way I see it, so if you go to Weimar, the titling agency still worked. Like you could still, and that was a pretty bad one. But you could still go to the government and have them recognize, because what you need, when you're transferring it, what you need is the third party of the state to recognize that the property has been transferred. So because you're worried that the big fear is that you hand over the silver and the gold, and then the transfer doesn't happen basically, and then you're just out the money, right? I don't know how it wouldn't happen, but or that something is blocking that transfer to occur. Sorry. So if you have the state, let's see, if you go to Weimar, the titling agencies, as bad as that was, the titling agencies still worked because you could buy a house for $500, right? Now, I apologize, excuse me. Now you might have to grease the skids. The one I'm thinking is you might have to, buy everyone a little cup of tea at the government agency, as it were. But that probably won't be very expensive. I would imagine it'd just be a few silver coins to get them to show up to work and actually process the paperwork and have the state recognize it. Now, if it gets worse than that, let's say it goes all the way to Mogadishu, like, America turns into a giant Somalia where we're just, it's Mogadishu, then it's going to be, you're going to say, look, I gave you this gold, you gave me this property. Now, if they, and maybe write a contract, just write something on a piece of paper, have them sign it.
Mhm.
If they try to renege, they're stealing from you. Like if once the initial crisis, you are going to be buying a house for like $5,000-$10,000, and they're going to be grateful for the money at the time. But once things calm down, they might say like, geez, I kind of got ripped off there. I would say it's very important to psychologically make sure they understand they're not getting ripped off. Like, this is very valuable right now, and you need this right now, and calm them down, walk them through like why this transfer is happening and why they're only getting X amount right now instead of what they thought they were going to get for their house, right? And I would also phrase it like, if they're like, why am I only getting this much? Don't say like, because I got 100 other houses to buy, right, from you suckers, right? Say, look, there's 100 other people here who need help, and I can't. If I help you, you're literally taking the food out of somebody else's mouth too. All right. So if you phrase it in those ways, you can get. I think psychologically you can get people a little calmed down, and so they're not going to feel like you ripped them off. Well, they might. I'm not saying they will feel like you ripped them off, but that's a potential feeling that someone could have, having to have sold their house in an emergency. Now, if they still feel that way, right, and they're trying to renege on the deal, and even if they're trying, like if they take your silver when it's 16-1, and then it falls back down to 50-1, and the property values goes up, and they're like, well, I don't want to sell my house anymore. Here's your silver back, right? Well, you took the silver when it was at its maximum possible purchasing power, and now you're handing me back at a much reduced power. So they're stealing from you. They are trying to steal from you at that point. And if it's Mogadishu, let's say we've gone all the way to Mogadishu and there's no one to call, then you're going to have to deal with it yourself. There's, there will be market solutions at that time.
Right.
So you can deal with yourself.
Like bouncers and personal security. There will be like local authorities probably.
Yeah. There might even be a local. I mean, look, in Mogadishu, there's in Somalia, every area has a local warlord. So you'd go to the warlord, you'd say, look, and these guys, warlords are warlords, but they're trying to like reestablish a state. So one of the things a state does is reinforce property rights. So you go to the warlord, you say, look, I got this contract here, rule on this, and hopefully you get King Solomon the Wise for your local warlord.
Yeah. But again, that's why we should stack it, because we should be the warlords.
Yes. Yes. You might end up being the local warlord who's making the judgments there too.
No, I don't want to be the warlord. I want to be the peace lord.
So I feel, my personal view is that theft is violence. I know there's people who are like, oh, if they're not physically taking from you, but there's a reason. Like if you go to the Middle Ages, like if you stole someone's, if you stole like nails from a blacksmith, like they would draw and quarter you, because that man hammered those nails out by hand, and he was going to sell them, and that's his livelihood. And you're making his children starve. It's not this, like, stop taking this abstract, like, oh, it's Target, they have insurance, and like, no, if you're stealing, you are taking the food out of other people's mouths. You're taking their dreams away. So I don't have a problem with, I don't have an academic problem, I should say. I've never done any of this stuff personally, so we'll find out. But I don't have an academic problem with like physically defending your property rights or physical retribution. In fact, I think a 30-year prison term is crueler punishment than a public whipping.
Yeah. Well, there's no concept of prison in the Torah. Actually, it doesn't exist. There's jail where you go until you're tried, but there's no prison. There's whipping, and there's death penalty, and there's ritual
restitution.
Penalty, there's social penalties, but there's no prison.
Is there restitution?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so you can pay back. I think that was back to Rob Roy real quick. I think the cattle rustler tried to pay him with silver, and he's like, no, I don't want. Like, if I cannot come back with the silver, because if I come back with the silver, then the next cattle rustler if he's going to make me chase him all over God's green earth. And when I finally catch him, he's just going to try and buy me off again. So that just makes it, no, I'm not going to be known to that guy.
What happened to the cow?
Eaten. They ate it. The cattle rustler stole the cow and ate it.
So that then, according to the Torah, he's responsible for paying 5 times the value of the cow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that could restitute the cause the restitution. So yeah, it'd be expensive. You'd have to make him more than whole, I guess. The restitution would have to be, I mean, you have to, if we're down to Mogadishu, like I said, it's going to be either a market solution, you're handling it yourself, or you're going to the local, to whatever local authority exists there. So that would be my answer, but it's not going to be, if it gets that bad, it's not going to be the titling office of the community, the local community.
Well,
I don't think it'll get that bad. I think we're looking, I can't imagine getting, at least for in America, I can't imagine it getting much worse than Weimar.
okay. What about what happened in the period of the Continental, right? That was right after the Revolutionary War and the Continental hyperinflated. That was hyperinflation, and it didn't seem to be that catastrophic. I mean, America got
Right, yeah.
through it.
But humanity's had hyperinflations before. I mean, in the community, apparently in the Great Depression, apparently communities really got together. I mean, people rose to the occasion for the most part. There's always going to be a 1 or 2% who are going to take advantage of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so again, this goes back to what I was saying. Like the safest places to be would probably be in Boulder, Colorado, with the Mormons, or
Yeah.
with the Amish, or some kind of religious community that has a common value. And even suburbs of generally just sane people that just want to go
Yeah.
on with their lives, that seems relatively safe. But again, like the New York City metropolises where you have entire neighborhoods of people that are they're just subsisting on welfare, and they do nothing all day but do drugs and shoot each other. I mean, you have things like that already in Chicago and New York, and
So it's not going to change much there. It's not going to change at all.
Right.
Except the welfare is gonna
It'll
run
get
high.
worse because at least these people are nominally fed and they're not starving, but they might reach that level. So basically, the bad neighborhoods that you wouldn't go in now, don't go in them then either. Don't go in them during the end game either. But you should be okay in the suburbs. But you should be armed because there's probably going to be a little, on the edges, invasions of the suburbs by the metropolises, by the big cities. So the farther you can get away from them, the better. How are we supposed to buy property for silver if the county clerk's office goes down? If there's no one to record it, well, then someone in your neighborhood is going to have to take the position of being the arbiter of property dispute.
It might even be you.
Yeah, it might.
I mean, honestly, I think, and I would also say only do business with people you think you can trust. Obviously that's hard. But if you know somebody and then you're buying their house, like you're going to have because they're going to be renting to you once the currencies get reestablished and they start getting an income again. So, you're going to have a long-term relationship with this person. So say, look, we got to work together here. We're going to be working together for, joining our lives together for quite some time now.
Really, that's how it is now. I mean, I know a few business people, small business people, and they don't want anything to do with courts. They don't trust the court system. They only do business with people who they know they can trust, and they don't even write contracts. They don't like doing that. Like they say, okay, so I know the owner of a distillery, and he has to get some product from XYZ, and he can sign a paper and have a contract, because just forget it, because even if I had a contract, if you renege on me, I'm gonna have to take that contract, go to court, sue you internationally across country lines, and then spend months and months trying to get through this. And I have business to do. I can't waste my time with this. So what's the point of a contract in the first place? Most people just do business with people who they trust now. So I don't think it would change.
Yeah. So keep it that way. If you think someone is going to renege on the property buy, like if you try, they're going to take your silver and gold and then try and renege out of that, then just don't buy the property from them. If that's a worry that you have.
Right. Okay.
By the way, I want to add one other thing. The worse it gets, the cheaper everything's going to get too. So, 5 ounces of gold for a house is, for the house of your dreams, is that's Vibar. So if it goes all the way to Mogadishu, it might go down to 2 ounces. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a self-balancing act, because the cheaper everything is in gold and silver terms, the faster the gold and silver diffuses in society, because it becomes irresistible not to spend it, and that is itself what balances the situation. Yeah,
and that helps recover things back out. You think the Chinese the CCP is going to collapse, or China is going to collapse into the same level of decentralized chaos?
Yeah, we were discussing this before in terms of it's incorrect to see trade surpluses as a positive and trade deficits as a negative. You could just as well see it in the opposite sense. I mean, Rothbard said this too when he was talking about balance of trade. Like, balance of trade doesn't matter. You know, it's great to get for Americans to get free stuff, and all they have to do is print a bunch of paper and give it to China, and it works out as long as they don't, as long as the dollar can keep buying stuff. But eventually it can't. And then who gets screwed in that situation? Well, the US gets screwed because it can no longer buy the stuff that it was buying before, and all of a sudden it can't have that stuff, and it's gonna have to either make it itself or not have those things. Or the other one who gets screwed is China, because now they have all these savings in their basement that they can't do anything with. So what are they gonna do? It's like an extension of mercantilism, right? This stupid idea that you should export more than you import and just stack money or stack gold and silver forever and ever and ever and never spend it. And then what happens when you don't spend it? Well, then because you have this religious feeling that you need to have your exports higher than your imports all the time. So then you go to the new world and you just pillage that for the stuff that you need, because you're not going to trade because you don't want to spend your gold. I mean, that was the problem with mercantilism, right? And these trade deficits or trade surpluses that China always has to have a surplus and America always has to have a deficit. It's just an extension of mercantilism. Israel's also going to have to restructure, where everything is geared towards high tech, towards the high tech industry, because that's what Israel specializes in. So the banks, you know, I just opened a business account, and you get special terms if you're opening a high tech business, because the banks want to get in on that because it seems to be working. But you know, I didn't get any of those special conditions because I just write content, so they didn't give me any good deal. But you see how an economy kind of like pushes along in the direction it's already going, or any business will do that also. If a business starts and then it sees that it's selling in a certain area, it'll just focus on that area and then get lopsided, which is fine if you have normal price signals. But in a situation where all the price signals are messed up because of inflation, and you keep going toward in one direction because the price signals are saying, yes, this is the right direction to go, and all of a sudden, oh, those price signals are all lies, and then you're stuck with, you know, this whole, you know, a whole factory full of widgets that no one's going to use, and then you got to very quickly retool your entire industry to something else. But that's what we're talking about when we're talking about the end game. It's like everyone's doing the wrong thing, and then all of a sudden they're going to realize all at the same time, and then everyone's going to have to retool everything simultaneously, which they're not going to be able to do.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm laughing at the absurdity of it. It's terrifying if you think about it, but it's like how did we get to this point? That is something else.
By clipping coins. We got to it by clipping coins.
Once you start clipping coins, right?
Anarchy. Will slavery return? Probably. Because what is a destitute person who cannot pay his debts or has no skills? What's he going to do in this kind of society? He's going to have to be a slave, right?
Why can't he work for just a wage? Why does he have to be a slave though? Like, why does he have to say, I will, you know, bond myself to you? Why can't he just say, I'll work for you and you give me money?
Well, it's slavery is the same thing. You know, there's not that much difference in, let's say, a wage earner and a slave, because the wage earner is contracting himself to do something for you, and you own his time, and then he gets the same amount of money. But you know, slavery is just working down a debt. If you owe this guy $20,000-$30,000 and you can't pay it, so you have to work for free until the market value of your labor equals $20,000-$30,000, and then you're freed. The baseline of at least westernized behavior is law and order. Right? It can get really bad, but the period of pure anarchy doesn't last very long.
Yeah, I don't think it'll last more than a few months. I really don't. I hope not.
Yeah,
really hope not.
And in those first few months, you're going to be acquiring a lot of property with your money, and after those first few months, I mean, who is in charge of each section of town by how much property you've acquired with your gold and silver? That's going to establish you as being on the next level of how to reorganize these different towns, how to work together. to build it back up. And look, things are going to be much less centralized. I don't think there's going to be that much of a trade relationship between China and the US anymore.
Yeah, I don't think there'll be any. Yeah, almost none.
There will be trade relationships between, let's say, Virginia and West Virginia, and West Virginia and Illinois, or whoever's next over there, or Illinois and Michigan. But we're not going to have this world where you have these humongous container ships stacked to the brim, moving cheap plastic goods across oceans. That we're not going to have that anymore.
Do you think there'll still be international travel? Like you should still be able to catch a plane, I would think.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot less common and a lot more expensive, probably.
It'll be a lot more expensive.
Yeah.
Why would it be more expensive?
If we're in a more decentralized world and your stuff is coming from the next municipality over, or the next town, what would be the point of going to China other than just traveling or seeing the world?
What I'm thinking is, like, my wife's Korean, so I have family in Korea, so I'd like to be able to visit them if possible.
Right. So you would go for recreational reasons. There wouldn't be that business reason to go.
Yeah. Okay. So there's not like, I was trying to think if there'd be a force that would make it prohibitive to travel abroad unless you're like giga wealthy,
If we think about that in terms of capital, what is the structure of production that requires planes to be built with the efficiency to the point that a plane ticket is affordable, right? Are those
That's true, yeah.
Are those chains going to be alive? Or is there going to be a reason to invest in infrastructure that would, build all these planes so that people can travel across the world in half a day all the time? Or
so you think Boeing might go down, huh?
Or if you really want to go to Korea, are you going to have to like hop on a boat and then spend, a month or two sailing or whatever it is?
You think we're going back to like the pre-jet age? Good Lord. And the pre-airplane age?
Not technologically.
Yeah. Just cost-wise. There's just no reason to build the plane, I see. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is, like, why do you need planes? Because people are moving because of labor, or they're moving across the world because of business. There's all these kinds of economic relationships that won't exist anymore, or at least they won't exist for many years. I mean, they will be rebuilt eventually. But in the aftermath, these chains won't exist anymore. So the only reason the best way to travel would be by boat. Boats are probably a lot easier to make than planes. I mean, with planes, you don't only need the infrastructure that creates the plane. You need the air traffic control and the fuel. I mean, there's so much.
The pilots. Yeah, there's a lot to it.
Yeah. There's just way too much. So I think there's going to be a lot less travel in the initial stages after the end game.
I can imagine there being a lot less. I still think there'll be some. I don't know though. Maybe there won't.
Yeah.
Maybe Boeing will go down and no one will be willing to maintain the planes anymore.
Well, we'll see how correct we are when this happens.
Unfortunately, I don't know if we'll be able. There probably won't be a YouTube where we can get up and confirm our predictions or not.
the day we're able to talk to each other again after the end game hits is the day we know we're going back in the right direction. I'll ask you about your fiefdom. How's your?
I'll have a giant caveman beard. Yeah.
How many concubines do you have?
Yeah. Yeah, you'll have a golden scepter and being fanned with palm fronds. Yeah.
The way I can summarize this is that nobody knows exactly what this is going to look like, but on small scales, we've been through this before. This is not the first time. This is just the biggest time, and it's the whole world now. But the collapse of the Roman Empire was the closest that we've come to this, and not everyone died during the collapse of the Roman Empire. Humanity survived. We went on, and we're going to come out of this with a lot more technological knowledge. A lot more cultural knowledge, a lot more history, and some people are not going to survive it, but I think the majority of people will. I mean, I'm not saying 50% plus one, but I think a good deal of people will, and like someone who hits rock bottom after going on a drug binge, or a drinking binge and they realize they can't do this anymore, a lot of people will come to their senses and realize that their lives have been completely insane and will rebuild, and it will be okay. It's going to be scary, but not for that long. A lot of people won't make it, but I don't think it's going to be half of the population. I think it's going to be focused mostly in the big cities, like the really decrepit neighborhoods are really they're gonna eat each other. So the neighborhoods that you wouldn't go in now, a lot of them are going to be gone.
Yeah. The sense of community, for all the research I've done so far suggests that like the communities establish themselves very, very quickly. So what I would do is just reach out to your neighbors and your friends and neighbors, and get your communities established. Do what you can now, and then nature's going to take its course. So everyone's going to instinctively start, because like you said before, just to wrap it back to the beginning, you were talking about humanity's instinct. One of our instincts is to form communities. So I think it'll instinctually take over, and I think everything will be, it'll be okay with, you, me, and, who's ever listening at the helm. You're obviously an intelligent, responsible person because you're listening to us. And that will, these nodes, every single node that we're building is one node that is protecting humanity.
Yeah.
And it's one more node that's going to burst out with the silver and gold and reestablish the economic order and get things going again.
We're already rebuilding before this happens, and the more we do that, the easier the transition will be.
Absolutely. All right, Rafi, take care.
Okay.
We're seeing next week. We'll find out if anything's blown up yet.
We have a raffle here. All the paid subscribers to the End Game Investor entered into a raffle to win a free Dirty Man safe. We're talking about going really low tech here, going back to gold and silver money, passing coins to each other in the end game. And where are you going to put your money? Not with the government, not with any trackable fund. Dig a hole somewhere on your property or somewhere in the wilderness where you have a topographical map, and put your money in there and bury it. Not all of it, but some. So I have a few emails in here, little shreds of paper. I'm going to pick one, and then I will email you, and then you can I will contact you. Let's see. We have
Oh, it's me. What are the odds?
we have somebody named M. Benson. So M. Benson, I don't know who you are, but I will email you at this email, and you have won a free Dirty Man safe. I will send it to you. Maybe we'll do another raffle next month. We'll see what we got. Maybe some silver coins or some interesting coins I got from these German people who think they're from the tribe of Ephraim. They're pretty nice. And I'll see you, Phil, in a month for our next powwow, and maybe it'll be the end game by then. Who knows?
Godspeed, Rafi.
Okay, bye.
Take care, man. Bye.